What is good, everyone? Today we have a fire video planned where I'm going to be making a tier list of the top alcohol alternatives. Alk has many side effects. It basically cooks every single organ in your body, especially your liver. So the alternatives that I'm going to be telling you about in this video basically have the similar effect of lowering your inhibitions and giving you that, even slightly spaced out feeling, but don't actually harm your body, or at least not as much. And before I get into it, this video is for educational purposes only. I do not encourage or condone the use of any of the compounds talked about in this video. This video is purely meant to educate you on these alternatives and how they work neurochemically. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So we're gonna start off strong with kava. The best way that I can describe this is pretty much just natural alcohol. It literally binds to the exact same receptor, the GABA A receptor, but it comes from a root, and it goes through a process of straining and drying and ends up in a drink. The actual alkaloids that produce its effects are called kavalactones, and there are many of them, but the best one is kavain. So kava strains that are high in kavain are the best ones. I've tried it many times. I've tried extracts, I've tried instant kava, all sorts of stuff. And I'll say right away, don't get the extracts, don't get gummies, don't get some weird extract liquid. Just getting either instant kava or making your own from the root, you can buy the root and then strain it yourself, are the best options. And it can actually work surprisingly well. This could really be used as a good alternative, and people actually do. In the US and other countries, there's way more kava bars opening up where they pretty much just serve kava instead of alk. And one of the best parts is that it barely has any side effects on your health, and there's barely any tolerance buildup. So those two things I'd say are like the best part about kava, because having a tolerance buildup that leads to addiction and dependence, and the negative health effects also messes you up, but kava doesn't have those. So for alternatives, I'll have to put this into S tier, like 100%. The liver's similar effects, literally binds to the exact same receptor, is 100% natural, has no tolerance and no negative health effects, pretty much. That's a win-win. It's perfect. All right, moving on to the next alternative, we have pregabalin, also known as Lyrica, which is like the brand name of it. Lyrica has actually been gaining some popularity recently because creators like Clavicular uses it instead of alk. That's literally his alk alternative, and many other creators as well. But it works differently. It doesn't bind to any GABA receptors. It binds to voltage-gated calcium channels, pretty much creating its own receptor site. It pretty much works exactly like gabapentin. Lyrica, all it really is just like a more bioavailable version of gabapentin, more potent and bioavailable. So I've tried this as well, and it's not really as strong. I'd say that's, the only downside. There is tolerance buildup and there is risk of dependency, but way less than alcohol. And it does a pretty good job at lowering inhibitions and, creating that floaty feeling. Just not as strong, not as strong, but it does lower inhibitions. Less risk for dependency and tolerance, and basically no harmful side effects, which is really good. And I'm gonna put this into the A tier. And since we're on the pharmaceuticals, I'm gonna bring up Xanax. This is alprazolam. Pretty much it's in the class of benzodiazepines. Oh yeah, and also Lyrica is in the class of gabapentinoids. Forgot to mention that. Benzodiazepines, like Xanax, they bind to the GABA A receptor, the exact same one as alcohol, but even stronger, I'd say. And the tolerance buildup is faster and dependency risk is even higher, but it doesn't affect your health negatively unless you're talking about your brain, because with benzodiazepines, there's something called protracted withdrawal, which means that if you built up a dependence and you're coming off of it, the withdrawal can actually give you permanent brain damage, which is very risky and dangerous. So it does achieve similar effects. It does lower your inhibitions and basically create all the other effects, but it is very risky, and the risk for misuse, abuse, addiction, and dependency is even higher than alcohol. So because of that, I am going to be putting it into the D tier, not the E tier, because it does bind to the same receptor. It does technically work, but it's risky, and I honestly think it's a better idea to just stick to alcohol at that point. All right, next up we got kratom. So kratom, this is a little bit of a curveball, but after trying it, I like to think of it as kind of a friendly alcohol. Its botanical name is Mitragyna speciosa, and yeah, it's basically just a leaf growing on a tree. And the active alkaloids are 7-O, which is 7-hydroxymitragynine and mitragynine. And they don't bind to GABA receptors at all. They mainly bind to the mu opioid receptor, which is the same receptor that, all your typical opioids hit. It also does have some effect on adrenergic receptors, so like adrenaline, and some serotonergic activity as well. And I also heard it does have some activity at the voltage gated channels similar to Lyrica as well. But anyway, it does lower inhibitions, it does lower anxiety, increase energy, increase sociability. It does definitely have its own risk of dependency and addiction, but it is way lighter on the body. I think it has very minimal effects on the liver, and that's only if you overuse it. And overall, I would definitely choose it over alcohol. Like, it's a pretty good alternative, but it still has its own risks. It is like, I guess you could say, like its own drug pretty much. And because of that, I'm going to be putting it into the A tier. Next up, we got kombucha. It's pretty much just fermented mushroom juice with sugar. I know it sounds kind of gross, but it actually tastes pretty damn good. Shout out to Synergy. But anyway, kombucha does actually contain alcohol, but only like 0.5 to 2 or 3%. So very, very, very low. It's like a very light beer pretty much. And why I put kombucha on the list wasn't because of its effects, but because of the taste and like the mild feeling that it gives you. It's kind of like replaces the oral fixation of beer or something like that. And I do know multiple people, especially adults in my life, that did end up swapping out alcohol for kombucha. So it does work, but it doesn't really produce any effects. That's the thing. And because of that, I am going to give it a C tier, because all it really does is replace that oral fixation, and it has that kind of beer like taste. I really don't know how to describe it. You got to try it yourself. All right, next up we got phenibut. So what I have here is Somatomax by High Tech Pharmaceuticals. Not sponsored, but it's just a sleep aid with phenibut inside of it, but that's besides the case. Phenibut was pretty much developed in the 1980s or 90s in Russia, and it's still actually used as a prescribed medication there to this day. It binds to the GABA B receptor, so still works on GABA receptors, but slightly different from things like alcohol and Xanax. Now, out of the whole list, this is the one that I actually have not tried, so I can't give you too many details on the effects themselves, but I have read many reviews and watched many experiences, and I think it's pretty similar, except it's a lot more clear-headed, but it still lowers inhibitions, has kind of a muscle relaxant effect, all of that stuff. It's sometimes even used as a nootropic to boost cognition, motivation, and focus, which is really interesting because, things that usually bind to the GABA receptor, they actually like reduce your cognition, but this one is actually used as a nootropic, which is interesting. But on the downside, there can definitely be dependency and addiction with it. But if it's used occasionally, it can be safe. But it all really depends on how responsible you're going to be, right? So I don't think it's as risky as benzodiazepines, but it still has some risk. Other than that, it's a good alternative, so I'm going to give it a B tier. And last but not least, finally, we have catuaba bark. This is different than pretty much everything on here because this is a supplement, like a herb, kind of like ashwagandha. So catuaba bark is a Brazilian herb that's traditionally used as an aphrodisiac, so to increase libido, but it also has some sociable effects and some lowering of inhibitions, although very mild. So what I've noticed from catuaba, it's not like completely alters my state of mind, but I definitely become a lot more confident, a lot more talkative. I'm more in a mood to do, like fun things, to like take risks. So it's like a really natural alternative, right? So if you don't want to alter your state of mind, if that's important to you, then catuaba bark is a pretty good natural supplement. The only downside is that the effects are kind of weak. I'm lucky that, I'm sensitive to it. I've had friends try it where they say they don't feel anything at all. But for me personally, I definitely feel it, especially if I take a higher dose. Like it's something that's actually useful to me. And I've tried many supplements in my life, and this is one that actually kind of works. But like I said, the effects are weak. So I can't put it too high on the scale. So I think I am going to give it probably a B tier below phenibut. Like I said, it's a good, natural, healthy option, but the effects aren't as strong depending on you. Like for me, it works pretty good. For most people, I really don't know. But yeah, that is it for this list. I hope you found this video useful. Leave a comment down below, leaving me your thoughts, experiences, or any other ideas, maybe other alternatives that you've used. Thank you for watching till the end of the video, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.